Welcome back to Roller Coaster. It's the best coaster of the year, kind of weekly series. That's right, because last week, or rather last month, I asked you what the best coaster of 1999 was. I gave you four coasters, and of them, Anaconda barely edged out Afterburn. Anaconda at Glory City. That is the unique Guy Vanola invert, the only invert Guy Vanola made, exclusively themselves. They often helped Intamin out and make a few inverts like Eurostar, but yeah, that barely defeated Afterburn, or when it opened, it was called Top Gun over at Carowinds. That's the B&M. Both of them are really solid, intense inverts. Got some really nice intensive versions. But I've always kind of been pushing for Anaconda. It's got the really long trains, which means the back row is like even more intense because you get even more pull through the inversions for just some insane positive Gs. But that isn't to say Afterburn doesn't have an insane layout with that bat wing. Some great that great zero roll. The corkscrew is super whippy. That crazy corkscrew is that thing was really whippy. And also there were two Woodies that are very formidable as well. You got Tremors at Silverwood, great Twister CCI, some solid laterals and a few airtime moments. Great night ride I've heard. Twister at Knoebels, same sort of thing. Less airtime, more laterals and intensity if you're into that kind of ride. But two very solid wooden coasters. But people tend to prefer these nice inverters. I don't know. Tremors might be good enough. Twister might be. I haven't read any of these things, but that seems to be the consensus. But yeah, Anaconda, I'll agree with it for now. Definitely a really solid invert. Actually, it's funny how close that Anaconda and Afterburn were because over a year ago, in the first maybe the first week of the A to Z Coach for the Week, Anaconda battled Afterburn, and Anaconda like destroyed it. Like one Anaconda got like 50% of the votes. Afterburn got 24. So yeah, it's interesting that that's changed. My viewers have increased and changed, and interesting. Moving on, we have that's right, the new Millennium, the best coaster of 2000. There were a lot of coasters that were really good this year, so I actually included 5. So yeah, that's a little awkward, but I did not want to exclude anything. I feel like I would have it just would have hurt me inside to exclude any of these. So we got Millennium Force at Cedar Point, the Intamin Giga, Boulder Dash at Lake Compounce, the CCI Terrain Woody, Katoon at Maribel End of the B&M Inverts, Superman Ride of Steel at Six Flags New England, the Intamin Hyper, and that's what that name has been changed a few times, so now it's known as Superman the Ride. It was called Bizarro a few years ago. And also Legend at Holiday World, the CCI Twister Wooden Coaster. So y'all are gonna vote using the eye on the top right corner of the video for one of those 5 coasters. Now let's talk about some more coasters that opened in this year. There were a lot. Of course, this is 2000. Everybody was like, "Oh man, New Millennium, we're gonna buy a new coaster and everybody's gonna ride it." And some of them didn't go so well. So we'll talk about some of those. So Boss, this didn't go so well because they haven't RMC'd it yet. Just kidding. Well, yeah, I mean they should RMC it, but they probably never will. This is this is a pretty massive CCI with a bunch of crazy like tall drops, like a few 100-foot tall drops. It's got trims. It's mostly a lateral intensity sort of ride. There's a lot of laterals in this ride. It's seen some modifications. It had its final double helix removed this season, which is a big bummer. But I've heard the night ride is insane, and I've heard you get some crazy laterals. And yes, please RMC it. A coaster that you've not probably heard of though. Donny Beach Hurricane. This was an old wooden coaster down in Florida, and it was at Boomers, which is like an arcade sort of place. So it wasn't like this coaster got a lot of riders, like like local riders. It was mostly enthusiasts who were like, "Dude, let's go freaking ride this thing." And it was a really good roller coaster. It was made by actually Coaster Works, which made only a few coasters. This and they might have made Coastersaurus as well, and also another coaster on this list I'll talk about later, Thunder Eagle. So Donny Beach, though, is definitely the best of all those. I don't know if Coaster Works made Coastersaurus, but I'm getting distracted. Donny Beach Hurricane. Some really like the airtime hills in this ride have bite. Like you got some ejector, and it looked really solid. Some floater moments in there too. Just all kinds of airtime on this ride. Some solid looking laterals as well. Just a really cool little out and back L-shaped layout, and definitely an underrated ride. And it's a shame that it was closed down in around 2011, demolished in 2015. But I'm sure it didn't really get the business that they were hoping. But they did not advertise themselves as a theme park, so they're not doing so well. Meanwhile, Fun Spot, they're doing the right thing. So good job, Fun Spot, for finally figuring out how to have a successful wooden coaster in Florida. Okay, also Diving Machine G5 at Zhanfusun Fancy World in Taiwan. That was kind of Oblivion's clone. It came out 2 years after, but it's still Oblivion's clone. Oh, great, my phone's ringing. Can't answer that. Haha. Goliath at Six Flags Magic Mountain. That is the Guyvanola Hyper, so same year as Anaconda. Or, year after Anaconda, sorry. Uh, Guyvanola Hyper. I've been on this one. Pretty crazy. I also skipped Dominator, but we'll talk about that. So, Goliath at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Guyvanola Hyper. This ride is like one airtime hill, and it's not even very good. I've heard you can get some floater, but like, no. I got nothing. Really weird. But the main point of this ride is the intensity at the bottom of the drops and on that main helix, like, oh man, like after that mid course that takes away all the speed, unfortunately, there's still this insane helix that if they didn't trim the mid course, I could have blacked out, honestly. I grayed out pretty hard, and it was just one of the most intense moments on a coaster I've been on. I rank it rather high just because of how intense that moment was. So, yeah. Also, Batman Night Flight, and or, well, that's what it was called when it opened. And then when Cedar Fair took over, they renamed it to Dominator. That's over at Geauga Lake. It was RIP Geauga Lake, close to 2007. But of course, Dominator is still around today as Dominator at King's Dominion, which is, So anyway, yeah, so that's a floatless coaster by B&M. Pretty solid 5 inversions. It is still to this day the longest floatless coaster with since it kind of does like these like high speed turns when floatless coasters usually do the inversions. Yeah, it like does the vertical loop and then it does some twisties. There's no zero G roll. It goes into a cobra roll, mid course, then the double corkscrew, interlocking corkscrews. The usual. So yeah, so that's Dominator. You kind of want more of a unique floatless coaster. Pretty cool, pretty cool. I've heard people say it's the best floatless coaster. I've heard people say it's the worst. I don't even know where I stand. Also, Hurricane at Myrtle Beach Pavilion that opened this year. That was a CCI with a pretty basic layout. It's got the L-shaped double out and back, and then there's a helix inside the lift hill, and then that's the end of the ride. Oh man, Rob Alvey's POV was like he was trying to say it was the worst coaster of all time, and I guess this thing just did not age well, even though it was only open for like 6 years. It got like super rough after only a few years of operation, and it had the Gerstlauer trains, which are the ones that nobody likes because there's not a lot of leg room, and it just kind of brings out the roughness in the ride or something. I don't know. They're lighter trains. I don't know many specifics, but I know that it was a pretty rough CCI with a solid layout. So I'm sure when it opened, it was all right, but it was not all right for most of its lifetime, unfortunately. So yeah, Kraken at SeaWorld Orlando was another floatless coaster that opened this year. One of the many, actually. A lot of floatless coasters opened in 2000. Of course, so SeaWorld Orlando, this is 7 inversions. It's the only floorless, I believe, only floorless to have a vertical loop after the mid-course. Or not after the mid-course. Isn't the mid-course? Let me think about this. It does the vertical loop, 0G roll, Immelman, or does it do vertical loop, Immelman, 0G roll? It's in one of those orders. And then it does it does the Cobra roll, then a vertical loop, I believe. Then you got the mid-course, double corkscrew. Or no, not double corkscrew. Loop, corkscrew. What am I saying? I'm sorry. I'll stop talking. 7 inversions, and there's 2 vertical loops, which is unique, kind of like Incredible Hulk. Incredible Hulk is the same sort of thing, yeah. Interesting that they're in the same freaking city that you can ride B&Ms with 2 loops. Yeah, anyway, pretty solid floatless coaster. Nice theming. They finally took the VR off of it after only a year, so that's fortunate. Yeah, Kraken, solid floatless. I didn't say as much about it as Dominator because it's a little bit more basic, but yeah, it's right next to that little lake at SeaWorld Orlando, and it's pretty alright. One of the 3 B&Ms in that park. And also, Lightning Racer at Hershey Park opened this year. That's the GCI, the dueling GCI. Which I've heard is one of the weakest GCIs. That makes sense. I mean, it's an older GCI. It's not going to have the same, bite and, the craziness of the newer ones. But it still it has some great little dueling moments where you can interact with the other train and, be like, say something stupid to your friend on the other train. And that'd be pretty fun. And I guess it actually duels every time, which is not easy to do sometimes. So that's pretty rad. But yeah, I've heard it's one of the weaker GCIs. It's funny that Hershey Park, they kind of bought GCIs a little too early in their lifetime, where they didn't really have the same bite that they do now. So Wildcat and Lightning Racer are some of the weakest GCIs, and they're right next to each other in the same park. So interesting. Moving on, some more 2000 coasters. There's a lot. I told you. Magnus Colossus at Terra Medica. This is the prime candidate for an RMC. It's actually gone. It went standing but not operating a few years back. This is the RCCA on a cliff in Spain near Barcelona-ish area, Valencia. Yeah, it has a sick double down drop. That's right. The main drop is a double down. Like, that's so sick. But it was mega rough. It was mega stupid. The layout was pointless. But imagine what RMC could do to this thing. Unfortunately, Terra Medica is in like some. It's like almost bankrupt. I've heard they barely got anything new. They got a Zaxspin, Intamin Zaxspin, one of the smaller models a few years back. It's just there. It's kind of a mess over there. But if they could RMC this, it could be Iron Rattler 2, and that'd be really rad. Medusa at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom, another Flows coaster that opened this year. That is a pretty generic Flows, except for the fact that instead of a Cobra roll, it is a Sea Serpent roll, which means instead of doing two corkscrews in opposite directions, it does two corkscrews in the same direction, and then the half loops to connect to them. If that makes any sense. But basically, it's a Cobra roll that enters and exits in the same direction instead of different directions. So yeah, and it does the pretty straightforward stuff. Aside from that, the two corkscrews at the end of the ride, and yeah, generic floorless. Honestly, this is probably the most middle of the road floorless coaster I can possibly think of. Like, like everything else kind of has their own little things. So anyway, moving on. Regina at Tobu Zoo. That is the massive Intamin Woody, not a prefab. It's a normal Woody that Intamin made, and it's got a lot of like really drawn out hills that probably don't provide airtime. Towards the end of the ride, there might be some that have airtime, but it's really just this big helix machine. It's headlined by like these massive helixes. It's probably like 130 feet tall. Pretty big, menacing looking ride, and the advertising for this ride had like it's like a lady whose body turns into the shape of the wooden coaster, and it's really weird, and it's so Japanese. But yeah, but it's at the same park as Kawasemi, which is an Infinite Megalite, which means that park is so worth going to. So I'm sure a lot of people have ridden that just because they want to ride a Megalite. So yeah, definitely. Moving on, Robin Hood at Walibi Belgium. That's getting RMC'd next year, like for next year, opening next year. Getting RMC'd as we speak. And pretty solid looking ride. Not really, just kidding. I've heard it was horrible. There's a double up or a down on it that sucked. I remember Kenny Coaster fans saying that. And I remember that it's just a pretty stupid ride. It's like a double L, so like it's a kind of a U-shaped layout where it does the lift and then it does a left turn, and then a left and a right to get back. You know what I'm saying? So it's like a U. Yeah, it does some maritime hills in there, but they're all pretty terrible. Hurts really rough, and just not a very pleasant experience. So good thing it was getting RMC'd. I'm curious what kind of ride they're going with here, because I've never really seen like such an out and back layout get RMC'd yet, really. So yeah. Also, Sun and Beast at Kings Island opened this year. That's got the vertical loop and like the tallest Woody of all time. All those records, 218 feet tall, and just biggest Woody of all time. And also the worst Woody of all time. It had like basically four helixes, or two main helixes that went around twice, that were just so unpleasant and intense and not very nice on the body that after only 8 years of operating, boom, close it because very bad ride. Um, it's funny how everybody's like, oh my god, I wish I could have ridden Son of Beast. Yeah, that would have hurt, bro. You don't want to do that. Yeah. Yeah, and of course it had the vertical loop after the mid course. That was pretty strange. But it was removed in 2006 after they had to get lighter trains to make the ride less painful and horrible, and just, my god, what a mess of a ride that was. An interesting fact about it, they actually made the layout backwards. They knew the speed, they knew the height they wanted, and they knew the speed that they needed to traverse the vertical loop with. So they had to do something with the layout that got to this perfect speed to go through the vertical loop. So they basically made the layout like okay, so we'll make this airtime hill and then a helix. So like from the final brake run, airtime hill, helix, okay, and then that's where it'll be the speed for the vertical loop. So they made the vertical loop behind the helix, and they were like, They put a mid course before it to regulate the speed there, and then they were like, what do we do with the layout from this 214 foot drop, and in between this mid course for the vertical loop, and they decided on that massive, pointless, very pointless, massive helix there that just was never a very nice idea, and yeah, that looked horrible. Also, Speed the Ride here, that opened this year. That was not a bad ride. As a Premier Rides launch, had a pretty solid little launch into this tight turn, overbank turn, into that vertical loop, which led up a vertical spike, and then you went backwards like most Premier Rides coasters. So very cool stuff. Very fun ride that unfortunately closed. 2009? I think it did. Yeah, that's a bummer. It's hard. It was not demolished. You can still find the parts just sitting around as scrap in Las Vegas. Not scrap. You can still buy it today. In fact, but you probably won't ever see it operate again, unfortunately. But hey, man, if you got like a few million, then open this baby up and you'll get a few people that'll ride it. So cool stuff. Moving on, we have even more 2000 coasters. Stealth at California's Great America is one of them. That was a Vekoma Flying Dutchman with this really weird, wonky red and white layout or color scheme with black supports, gray supports that I don't think look very nice. But hey, interesting ride. We know this today as Nighthawk at Carowinds, which is the most painful of the Flying Dutchmen. It's funny, actually. Firehawk just closed. That's weird to think about. I've been kind of out of the coaster scene recently. I've just been so busy with band. I can't even abandon school, really. Senior year, starting up, college apps. So making this video is like, huh. Anyway, I just got way off topic. Firehawk closed. That's a new thing. That's weird. I'm glad I got on it before it did, though. Got on it in my 2017 visit to Kings Island. Wow, that's over a year ago now, man. I've been a coaster enthusiast for too long. Yeah, Stealth. Not the best Flying Dutchman, and now it's Nighthawk, and yeah, Batwing will always be the best now. Steel Dragon 2000 at Nagashima Spa-Land opened this year. That's the Morgan Giga, 318 feet tall or so, and longest coaster of all time, 8,100 feet or so. Lots of airtime, lots of helixes. Heart's a little rattly. They got B&M trains on it, so get rid of that. Still a little bit rattly because of course B&M's rattle, but yeah, big Morgan hyper, and it's okay. It's a moderately okay ride. It's probably only a little bit better than the Morgan hypers in America. Honestly, it just has a lot more airtime probably. Yeah, Superman Ultimate Escape, or it was renamed to Steel Venom. That was at Geauga Lake. Today it is possessed at Dorney Park, which is yellow, not red like it is here. But I think the red Impulse looks pretty sick. Red and blue Impulse. So not like V2. This is like red and blue Superman color. It's really cool. Yeah, it was a game of Superman, and it was just your standard vertical spike and straight spike on one side. You know, that the generic Impulse. It was actually the first Impulse because the majority of them opened in 2001. You know, the V2s were 2001, and whatever else opened. I think Wicked Twister was 2002. Steel Venom was 2003. Yeah, that's what I know. Okay, cool stuff. Superman Krypton coaster, another flowless coaster. I told you that there were a few of them, and yeah, that opened this year. I've been on this one because I've been to Fiesta Texas. Didn't ride Iron Rally when I went. You probably heard that before. Um, yeah, Krypton coaster. Some say it's like one of the better flowless coasters. I'd have to agree. It's pretty cool how it interacts with that terrain there. Um, it goes over the quarry wall. Dives off it. It does like a pretty tall vertical loop, like 140, 130 feet or so tall vertical loop. So pretty big ride. And it's got the 6 inversions, the vertical loop, zero G roll, double corkscrew, and just it does everything B&M Flores should do, really. Invert, be intense. No helixes, really, but it does the inversions, and it's pretty cool. Superman Ride of Steel at Safe Flight America opened this year as well. That was the Intamin Hyper that had a lot of straight sections and boring helixes. That kind of sucks. It's just a really mindless layout. Thunder Eagle at Race World. What a weird ride. That was made by Coasterworks. Had a really basic layout. Didn't really do a whole lot. And the park closed in 2001, so the coaster did too. It was relocated to Montreal, and basically it was scrapped, and they used some of the parts for Zip and Pippin at Bay Beach. So fun facts there. Villain at Geauga Lake was a CCI that opened in 2000, so one of the 3 coasters that opened that year at Geauga Lake. And it was a kind of a rough ride, had the Gerstlauer trains, and did like a double out and back layout. Kind of mindless, kind of just not the best CCI. Also, Express Platform 13 at Walibi Holland. The last coaster I'll talk about, that was a Vekoma similar to the Rock and Roller Coaster models that did that launch into the Sea Serpent Roll, and then just did a bunch of twisties, maybe a corkscrew in there if I'm correct. I don't even know. Just a crazy spaghetti bowl ride. And it's outdoors instead of indoors, so that's interesting. But I've heard it was pretty rough and just not a very nice ride. So there you go. There's all the relevant coasters that opened in 2000. Thanks for watching. See you later.